I was broke at 25, not just financially broke, but broke in my thinking. And there's a massive difference between those two things. You can fix being financially broke in a few years if you're willing to work. But being broke in your thinking, that can last a lifetime if you don't wake up to it. Let me ask you something, and I want you to really think about this. When you see someone driving a nice car, living in a beautiful home, taking vacations to places you've only dreamed about, what's your first thought? Be honest. Do you think they got lucky? Do you think they inherited it? Do you think they cheated somehow? Or do you think they did something different than what you're doing? Because here's what I discovered that changed everything for me. Rich people don't think about money the way poor people do. And I'm not talking about just the dollars in their bank account. I'm talking about the way they process information about wealth, about value, about opportunity, about time itself. It's like they're playing a completely different game with completely different rules, and most people don't even know the game exists. So today, I want to take you inside that game. I want to show you exactly how wealthy people think about money, and more importantly, how you can start thinking that way too. Because let me tell you something that might shock you. You're probably only one mindset shift away from completely changing your financial future. One shift. That's it. Let's start with something fundamental. Poor people think about money in terms of how much they can spend. Rich people think about money in terms of how much they can invest. See the difference? It's subtle, but it's everything. I remember when I got my first real paycheck, I was so excited. You know what I did? I went out and bought things, new clothes, went to nice restaurants, treated my friends, felt good, felt successful. And at the end of the month, I was broke again, waiting for the next paycheck. Sound familiar? Then I met a mentor who asked me a simple question. He said, "How much of that paycheck did you pay yourself?" I said, "What do you mean? It was all my money." He smiled and said, "No, you paid the landlord, you paid the restaurant, you paid the clothing store, you paid the car dealership. But how much did you pay yourself? How much did you set aside for your future self?" That question haunted me because I realized I had worked all month, and at the end of it, everyone else got paid except the one person who did the work. Me. My future me got nothing. Rich people understand something that most people miss entirely. They understand that every dollar is a soldier. Every single dollar can be deployed to work for you, to fight for your financial freedom, to capture more resources and bring them back to you. But most people, they send their soldiers out to die. They spend them on things that disappear, on experiences that fade, on stuff that loses value the moment they buy it. Now, I'm not saying don't enjoy your money. I'm not saying live like a monk and never buy anything. That's not wealth. That's poverty with a bank account. What I'm saying is this. Rich people enjoy their money after they've invested it. They let their money make more money first, and then they spend the profits. Poor people spend first and have nothing left to invest. Let me give you a real example. Two people, same job, same salary, $50,000 a year. Person A takes that money and lives up to every penny of it. Nice apartment, new car payment, latest phone, weekends out, looking good, looking successful. At the end of the year, they've spent $50,000 and they have what? Some stuff, some memories. And they're in the exact same financial position they started in. Person B takes that same $50,000. They live on $40,000. Not poverty, not suffering, just being smart, maybe a slightly smaller apartment, maybe keeping their current car another year, maybe cooking at home a few more nights a week. And that $10,000, they invest it. They put it to work. Fast forward 10 years. Person A still has the same $50,000 lifestyle, still living paycheck to paycheck, still one emergency away from financial disaster. Person B, they've invested $10,000 every year for 10 years. With compound growth, that's not just $100,000. That's potentially $150,000, maybe $200,000 depending on their investments. Plus, they've learned how to live well on less, which means their stress is lower, their options are greater, and they're building something real. This is what rich people understand about money. It's not about how much you make, it's about how much you keep and how hard you make that money work for you. But let's go deeper, because there's another critical difference in how rich people think. Poor people think about money in terms of time traded. Rich people think about money in terms of value created. What does that mean? Most people wake up and think, I need to work 8 hours today to make X amount of dollars. They're trading time for money. And here's the problem with that. You only have 24 hours in a day. You can only work so many of those hours. There's a ceiling, a limit. You hit it pretty quickly. Rich people think differently. They ask, what value can I create that people will pay for? Not how many hours can I work, but what problem can I solve? What need can I fill? What can I build or create or offer that improves people's lives in a way they're willing to exchange money for? See, when you trade time for money, you're in a losing game. When you create value, there's no limit. You can scale value. You can create something once and sell it 1,000 times. You can build a system that creates value while you sleep. I learned this the hard way. I spent years thinking that working harder meant working more hours. I'd put in 12, 14-hour days. I was exhausted. I was burned out. And you know what? I wasn't getting proportionally more successful. I was just getting more tired. Then someone asked me, what if instead of working 12 hours doing everything yourself, you worked 4 hours focusing only on the highest value activities, and you built systems or hired help for everything else? My first thought was, I can't afford that. But that's poor thinking. That's scarcity thinking. Rich thinking says, I can't afford not to do that. Because if I'm spending my time on low-value activities that someone else could do for $20 an hour, and that's preventing me from spending time on high-value activities that could generate hundreds or thousands of dollars an hour, I'm actually losing money by not investing in help. This is why rich people seem to have so much time. They're not busier than you. They're more focused than you. They've eliminated or delegated everything that doesn't create significant value, and they've laser-focused their energy on the things that move the needle. Now let's talk about another crucial difference. Poor people think about money as something to earn. Rich people think about money as something to attract. Stay with me here, because this sounds a bit philosophical, but it's incredibly practical. When you think about money as something you have to earn, you're in a mindset of labor, of grinding, of struggle. You're always chasing it, fighting for it, working yourself to exhaustion, trying to capture it. When you think about money as something you attract, you start asking different questions. You ask, what kind of person attracts financial abundance? What skills do they have? What value do they provide? What problems do they solve? How do they show up in the world? And then you become that person. You develop those skills. You provide that value. You solve those problems. You show up that way, and money flows to you naturally because you've become valuable. You've become someone that money seeks out. Rich people invest in becoming more valuable. They read constantly. They take courses. They find mentors. They develop skills that are rare and valuable. They build networks with other valuable people. They create reputations for excellence. And then opportunities come to them. Money comes to them, not because they're chasing it, but because they've made themselves magnetic to it. I once heard someone say, work harder on yourself than you do on your job. That changed my life because I realized I was spending 40, 50 hours a week working on my job, making someone else rich, making their company more valuable. And I was spending maybe an hour a week, if that, working on myself, on my skills, on my value, on my future. So I flipped it. I started dedicating serious time to personal development, reading for at least an hour a day, listening to educational content during my commute, taking online courses on weekends, seeking out people who were more successful than me and learning from them. And you know what happened? My value in the marketplace skyrocketed. The same work that used to pay me $50,000 started paying me $75,000, then $100,000, then more than I ever imagined because I wasn't the same person anymore. I had become more valuable. This is what rich people understand. Your income is directly proportional to the value you provide to the marketplace. If you want more income, become more valuable. It's that simple and that hard. Here's another critical difference in thinking. Poor people focus on problems. Rich people focus on opportunities. Same situation, completely different lens. Let me give you an example. The economy shifts, a new technology emerges, an industry changes. A poor person sees that and thinks, oh no, what am I going to lose? How is this going to hurt me? What problems is this going to create? Fear, worry, scarcity. A rich person sees the same situation and thinks, what opportunities does this create? How can I position myself to benefit from this change? What needs will emerge that I can fill? Who will need help navigating this transition? Curiosity, excitement, abundance. Your brain is incredibly powerful, but it's also incredibly obedient. It will find whatever you tell it to look for. If you tell it to look for problems, it will find problems everywhere, and you'll feel justified in staying where you are. If you tell it to look for opportunities, it will find those too, and you'll feel motivated to take action. This brings me to another huge difference. Poor people see money as finite. Rich people see money as infinite. Think about that for a second. If you believe there's only so much money to go around, only so many opportunities, only so much success available, then you're in competition with everyone else. If someone else wins, you lose. If someone else gets rich, that's less money available for you. That's scarcity thinking, and it's exhausting. It makes you suspicious of other people's success. It makes you jealous instead of inspired. Rich people understand that money is constantly being created. Value is constantly being generated. New solutions to new problems create new wealth. Money is flowing like a river, and your job isn't to hoard the drops you can catch, it's to position yourself in the flow. When someone else succeeds, rich people don't see that as less for them. They see it as proof that success is possible. They get inspired. They get curious. They think, what did they do that I can learn from? Let's talk about another critical element. Poor people make decisions based on current circumstances. Rich people make decisions based on future vision. Poor people look at their bank account and make decisions. I have this much money right now, so I can afford this, but I can't afford that. They're living in the present moment only. Rich people look at where they want to be in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, and they make decisions based on whether those decisions move them toward that vision or away from it. I learned this when I was completely broke and someone told me about a course that could teach me skills I needed. It cost $500. I had maybe $200 to my name. The poor thinking said, "You can't afford this. You need that money for rent and food." But I asked myself, if I don't take this course, where will I be in a year? Probably in the exact same place, still broke, still struggling. If I take this course, learn these skills, and apply them, where could I be in a year? I scraped together the money. I ate ramen noodles for a month, and I took the course. The skills I learned in that course led directly to opportunities that multiplied my income many times over. The $500 I spent became worth tens of thousands within a year, but I only made that decision because I was willing to make a short-term sacrifice for a long-term gain. Rich people do this constantly. They invest in education even when it's expensive. They invest in their health even when they're busy. They invest in relationships even when the payoff isn't immediate. They plant trees they won't sit under for years because they're thinking about future shade, not just today's sun. Here's another one that's huge. Poor people think about what they can get. Rich people think about what they can give. This sounds backwards, right? You'd think rich people would be more focused on getting, but it's the opposite. Poor people approach every situation thinking, what's in this for me? What can I get out of this? How much will they pay me? It's a taking mentality. Rich people approach situations thinking, what value can I add here? How can I help solve this problem? What can I contribute that will make this better? It's a giving mentality. And here's the paradox. The people who focus on giving end up receiving far more than the people who focus on getting. Because when you focus on providing value, on solving problems, on making other people's lives better, they want to keep you around. They want to pay you. They want to work with you. They recommend you to others. When you focus on what you can get, people sense that. They feel used. They pull back. They give you as little as possible. This is the power of a giving mindset. When you focus on creating value for others, you become wealthy as a side effect. When you focus on extracting value from others, you stay poor no matter how much you make. Now, let's talk about something that separates the wealthy from everyone else more than almost anything: how they think about risk. Poor people avoid risk at all costs. Rich people manage risk strategically. Poor people think safety comes from avoiding risk. So they stay in jobs they hate because it's secure. They keep money in savings accounts, earning nothing because it's safe. They don't start businesses or invest in opportunities because what if it doesn't work out? And you know what? Not taking risks is itself a huge risk. The risk of staying stuck, the risk of inflation eating your savings, the risk of waking up at 65 and realizing you played it safe your whole life and have nothing to show for it. Rich people understand that all of life involves risk. The question isn't, should I take risks? The question is, which risks are worth taking and how do I manage them? They understand calculated risk. They don't bet everything on one thing, but they also don't let fear prevent them from betting at all. Let me share another critical difference. Poor people think about money as an end goal. Rich people think about money as a tool. Poor people think, if I just had $1 million, I'd be happy. All my problems would be solved. Money is the destination. Rich people think, money is a tool that gives me options. It's a tool that allows me to create more value. It's a tool that buys freedom and opportunity. Money is a means to an end, not the end itself. Rich people know what they want money for, not just to be rich, but specific things: time with family, freedom to pursue meaningful work, ability to help others, security for loved ones. The money itself isn't the point. It's what the money enables that matters. Let's talk about failure because this is massive. Poor people see failure as evidence they're not good enough, not smart enough, not capable enough. Failure confirms their worst fears about themselves, so they avoid situations where they might fail. Rich people see failure as information. They see it as feedback. They see it as tuition paid in the university of life. They expect to fail on the way to success because they understand that's how you learn and grow. Every wealthy person I've studied has stories of massive failures, businesses that went bankrupt, investments that lost money, ideas that flopped, but they didn't let those failures define them. They let those failures refine them. I failed at my first 3 business attempts, lost money, lost time, felt embarrassed, but each one taught me something crucial. When I started the 4th business, I applied every lesson from the previous 3, and it worked. Not because I was smarter or luckier, but because I had learned what not to do. If I had quit after the first failure, or the second, or the third, I'd never have experienced the success that came from applying those lessons. Rich people understand that failure isn't the opposite of success. It's part of the path to success. Here's another one. Poor people consume. Rich people create. Look at how people spend their free time. Poor people come home and consume. They watch TV. They scroll social media. They play games. They're consuming content, consuming entertainment, consuming products. Rich people spend time creating value, creating products, creating content, creating businesses, creating relationships, creating solutions. They're producers, not just consumers. When you shift from primarily consuming to primarily creating, your brain changes. You start seeing the world differently. Instead of, what can I buy or watch or consume? You start thinking, what can I build or make or solve? Consumers stay poor because consumption costs money and produces nothing. Creators build wealth because creation generates value and attracts money. Let's talk about time, because rich people have a completely different relationship with time than poor people do. Poor people trade time for money and then spend that money on things to escape their jobs that take all their time. It's a vicious cycle. Rich people protect their time like it's their most valuable asset. Because it is. They understand you can always make more money, but you can never make more time. So they're ruthless about how they spend it. They say no to things that don't align with their goals. They eliminate time wasters. They delegate tasks that others can do. They invest in systems that save time. They focus only on high-value activities. I started tracking my time for a month. It was eye-opening. I discovered I was spending probably 20 hours a week on things that created almost no value. Social media scrolling, unnecessary meetings, busy work. I started eliminating those things ruthlessly. And suddenly, I had 20 extra hours a week to focus on high-value activities. My income doubled within 6 months, not because I worked more hours, but because I worked the right hours. Rich people know that how you spend your time determines your life. Poor people let time happen to them. Rich people design how they use time deliberately. Here's something else that's crucial. Rich people think in terms of leverage. Poor people think in terms of effort. Poor people believe success comes from working hard. And hard work matters, don't get me wrong. But rich people know that hard work alone isn't enough. You need leverage. What's leverage? It's getting more output from the same input. It's working smarter, not just harder. Poor people rely only on their own effort. They think, if I want to make more money, I need to work more hours. So they grind themselves into exhaustion with no leverage. Rich people think, how can I create more value without working more hours? What leverage can I use? So they invest in education to gain knowledge leverage. They build teams to gain labor leverage. They use technology to gain efficiency leverage. Rich people are always asking, how can I leverage this? Poor people are always asking, how hard do I need to work? Let me tell you about relationships, because how rich people and poor people think about relationships is dramatically different. Poor people see relationships transactionally. What can this person do for me right now? If there's no immediate benefit, they're not interested. Rich people see relationships as long-term investments. They build genuine connections with people without needing immediate payback. They add value to others' lives consistently. And over time, those relationships become incredibly valuable. Opportunities come through people. Knowledge comes through people. Support comes through people. Resources come through people. Rich people know that your network is your net worth. They cultivate relationships like a garden, consistently, patiently, generously. Poor people ignore relationships until they desperately need something, and then wonder why nobody helps them. Let's talk about learning. Poor people think education stops when school ends. Rich people see themselves as perpetual students. Poor people think, I have a degree, I'm educated, I'm done learning. Then they wonder why the world passes them by as things change. Rich people are reading constantly, taking courses constantly, seeking mentors constantly, learning new skills constantly. They know that in a changing world, if you stop learning, you start dying professionally. The wealthiest people I know read more books in a month than most people read in a year. They listen to podcasts during commutes. They take online courses on weekends. They hire coaches and consultants to teach them. Why? Because they understand that every new skill, every new piece of knowledge, every new perspective makes them more valuable. It's the best investment they can make. I committed to reading one book a week. That's 52 books a year. In 5 years, that's over 250 books worth of knowledge and wisdom. And it transformed my thinking, my skills, my results, my income. So let me bring this all together because I want you to walk out of here today with something you can use immediately. The wealth mindset isn't about the money you have right now. It's about how you think about money, about value, about yourself, about the future. And the beautiful thing is, you can change your thinking right now, today, this moment. You can decide right now to start thinking like a wealthy person. You can decide to invest instead of just spend. You can decide to create value instead of just trading time. You can decide to attract wealth by becoming more valuable instead of just chasing money. You can decide to see opportunities instead of just problems. You can decide to think abundantly instead of from scarcity. You can decide to make decisions based on your future vision instead of just your current circumstances. Every single wealthy person started somewhere. Most of them started with nothing, but they all had one thing in common. They changed their thinking before their circumstances changed. They developed the wealth mindset first, and the wealth followed. You don't need permission to think differently. You don't need anyone's approval. You don't need to wait until you have money to start thinking like a wealthy person. In fact, you need to think like a wealthy person before you'll ever have wealth. So here's my challenge to you. Pick one thing we talked about today, just one. Maybe it's starting to invest a portion of every paycheck. Maybe it's shifting from trading time to creating value. Maybe it's investing in your own education and development. Maybe it's starting to see opportunities instead of problems. Maybe it's building real relationships. Maybe it's taking a calculated risk you've been avoiding. Pick one thing and commit to it for the next 30 days. Not forever, just 30 days. See what happens when you start thinking differently about that one area. Because here's what I know. Small shifts in thinking lead to massive shifts in results. One different thought leads to one different action. One different action repeated becomes a different habit. Different habits create a different life. You are one decision away from a completely different future. The decision to think like a wealthy person even if you're not wealthy yet. The decision to see yourself as someone who creates value, attracts opportunities, and builds something meaningful. The game is available to everyone. The rules are available to everyone. The only question is, are you willing to learn them and play? Your financial future isn't determined by where you came from, what your parents had, or what your bank account looks like right now. It's determined by how you choose to think starting today. So think like a wealthy person, act like a wealthy person, become a wealthy person. Not just in your bank account, but in your mindset, your values, your approach to life. The wealth mindset isn't reserved for a special few. It's available to anyone willing to think differently, to grow, to learn, to create value, to take intelligent risks, to invest in themselves and their future. You have everything you need right now to start this journey. You have a brain that can learn. You have time you can redirect. You have value you can create. You have decisions you can make differently. The question is, will you? Will you make the decision today to think differently? Will you commit to developing the wealth mindset regardless of your current circumstances? Because I promise you this, if you change your thinking, your life will change. If you think like a wealthy person consistently, you will become a wealthy person eventually. It's not magic, it's not luck, it's not chance, it's cause and effect. It's the natural result of aligned thinking and action. So go out there and start thinking like the wealthy person you're becoming. Make decisions from that place. Take actions from that place. Build your life from that place. Your wealth is waiting for you, not out there somewhere, right here, in your mind, in your thinking, in your choices. Change your mind, change your life. That's not just a catchy phrase. That's the truth. That's the secret. That's everything. Now go make it happen.